Okay, hello everybody, Lord Wallace here. 20 of you might have noticed that I took down my SMT5 video from the other day. The reasons for that are numerous. I didn't really want 3 SMT5 videos in a row on this channel. I thought it would kind of look weird. This isn't really an SMT channel in the first place, but furthermore, I thought that video would be sort of redundant with this one and just directly inferior. The contents of that video were rather bland and surface level, just kind of a general overview, despite the fact that it was spoiler filled. And this video is going to be more of like a deeper cut. And also I just wasn't really satisfied with the quality of that video. Like, I'm already known for kind of just half-assing quality. I don't really do this for a living. A lot of the times I just want to vent or get my opinions up here. This video is sort of like that too, but I at least want to have some gameplay on the screen for y'all guys. But okay, let's get to the point of this video and why I'm even talking about this stuff, given that this game has already garnered a reputation for not being really story heavy. And just as a disclaimer, so that this isn't like, none of this is cope, it's just like, I don't think the game story is perfect by any means. I do think it's pretty lacking, even to the point of calling it unfinished. So that's my disclaimer. But out of morbid curiosity and boredom, I decided to sort of get out of my glass house with this game, because I know there's a lot of like more veteran fans who didn't really dig the game. They put more weight into the story and narrative and the characters than I do. And I kind of caught wind off of Reddit that this game's reputation was sort of souring, particularly on, okay, here we go, 4chan. And I went on here, and I think this is where it sort of started, this whole meme, or I'm sure most of the people that said this particular thing were just either memeing around or exaggerating for the sake of better expressing their frustration with the game. And that's okay, that's fine. But I think a lot of people took this at face value, that SMT5 has no themes. And, oh man, oh boy. I mean, I won't deny the story is a little bit light, but for something that has even a semblance of a narrative to not have themes, it would literally have to be just like AI generated words that do not mean anything together. Like, that's the level. And themes don't even necessarily mean that a story is good. So let me get that out of the way right now. But to actually, like, unironically at face value believe that this game has no themes is just is concave brain, just pretty dumb. Let me just debunk that right now before getting into the real topic of this video. I'm gonna just list like 4 themes here that I thought of up the top of my head as I was writing in my little fucking smartphone notepad. Not really a script even, it's just sort of an outline. So among SMT5 themes is taking responsibility for power lust. You see this with Sahori and the Bethel branch leaders. Overcoming imposter syndrome with Tao and maybe Ichiro. Using authority to cope with self-esteem. Ichiro, written all over his forehead. And conviction or responsibility out of shame, and just the theme of shame in general. You see this most prominently with Outgami and Abdiel. Now, there is a variance there in terms of the execution of those themes. I'm not saying that you're not allowed to criticize the game because it has these themes. I'll give you an example. The responsibility for power lust. We see there's a contrast between how Sahori gracefully accepts the consequences, her death, the consequences of her wishing for Lamu's power and being tempted by Lamu to exact her personal vengeance, and how the branch leaders deal with not being able to become Nahobino and usurp the throne, where they don't take it as gracefully. Now, the question comes, why? What is the game trying to say by offering these varying examples of taking responsibility, or just examples of power lust in general? I mean, Sahori's example came first, and she took it gracefully. You would think that this would be the other way around to try and say something, but the game unfortunately doesn't really follow through with that. That's where you can draw the criticism. But it certainly doesn't just lack this theme. It's very much there. But we haven't even gotten to like the biggest theme that I think encompasses SMT5 overall, the thing that's actually sort of at a certain point, like after the narrative actually starts, this is the theme that runs through the entire game and culminates at the end. And that's the theme of compromise or concession. Specifically, compromise in exchange for pragmatism. It's not really inter-ideology compromise or an advocacy for centrism in any way, as I'll explain later. Compromising your values, ethics, codes, or traditions to achieve a better outcome. I think that's what this game's main theme is. All those other ones were pretty minor by comparison, but I just listed them off to sort of shut up the brainlets that really say SMT 5, no themes, nothing to discuss here, just head empty. Again, I'm not saying that means that the story is like, it's pretty mid by SMT standards. I think it's worse than Strange Journey, SMT 4, and Nocturne. But I would say that's more due to the game story being incomplete rather than bad. And what's there's still stuff to take away from. And I really do want to convince you on this theme of compromise or concession. Because by understanding how this theme is incorporated into the game, you start to understand a lot of the decisions that might seem questionable on the surface, even if there was still a less messy way of presenting the themes. In case it hasn't been clear, there will be massive spoilers for SMT5 going forward. If you haven't finished SMT5 yet, then go ahead and click off this video. I'm about to spoil all the endings in about 5 seconds. The easiest way to start talking about how this theme is incorporated into the story is by talking about the Destroy the Throne ending, the bad neutral ending. This is the only ending that spawns from an ideology that never wavers, adapts, or compromises. It's essentially like the Yakumo ending, because Yakumo's ideology from beginning to end is that we should get rid of all gods, all demons, and their influences. Self-evidently, this includes rejecting all godlike power. And because we're unable to bend on this principle, we end up destroying the throne rather than utilizing it for good. And what happens because we destroy the throne out of sheer stubbornness? Well, nothing gets solved, humanity is left to fend for itself, and Tokyo disappears because Yuzuru made it clear this would happen if nobody took the throne to do something about it. This is in contrast to the outcomes set up by the Law and Chaos endings, which, while not without trade-offs, are actually somewhat favorable. This is because these ideologies were able to adapt and compromise from traditional paradigms of law and chaos that are also presented in this game. And unfortunately, this is where the undercooked, minimalist sort of style of this game's story expects you to already be familiar with law and chaos paradigms of the previous games. Especially for Chaos, they don't really make it clear what the hell Ariok even wants. But based on how they talk about him and the forces of chaos at the beginning of the game, it's something close to like the endings of SMT4 and Strange Journey. It really isn't a coincidence that both traditional representations of law and chaos in this game are unable to even come close to occupying Yahweh's former throne and suffer tremendous losses. The traditional law faction in this game is unable to accept Yahweh's death and accept no other but him to be the central and absolute authority of the world, and that's why they lose 18 years ago in the initial war between angels and demons. Meanwhile, the new law faction, headed by fallen Abdiel and Ichiro, is able to move on and accept somebody else to uphold God's order in his place, and that's why they can win. The traditional Chaos faction in this game is attempting inferably to enforce some kind of Mad Max survival of the fittest, just absolute anarchy onto the world, and nobody can accept that, including another Chaos faction. They all turn against them, and that's why they lose in the actual events of the game, the little like salty runback war between angels and demons. They lose and are unable to accomplish a damn thing. Meanwhile, the new Chaos faction is able to place some value in authority, compromise on that, and instead focus on decentralizing that authority, and that's why they can win. And finally, in the true neutral ending, you're able to bend on your principles just enough to be able to utilize the godlike power in order to actually bring about a world that's just for humans, and that's why that can happen. Pretty straightforward stuff so far, right? Except, I might have lied to you a little bit. Saying that the theme of the game is compromise is still just the most boiled down and fundamental theme. It's really not specific enough. At its most specific, I think this game is about rendering one's ideology of the fact that it is arbitrary old guard tradition and expectation. This is why there's so much emphasis and screen time on this archetypical law versus chaos conflict we've seen in 4 other Megaten games that actually doesn't have much to do with the final alignment conflict. The alignments have all drastically evolved by the time you get to the Empyrean compared to the forces that are fighting in Chiyoda. The neutral alignment is the exception in SMT5, as it doesn't really have much of an old guard paradigm to draw from that's unideal to contrast with. Instead, it's the alignment that most blatantly demonstrates the ramifications of being unwilling to shed the arbitrary code attached to your ideology. It really isn't as simple as just extremism bad either, because this is a theme that has sort of been played with in other SMT games that is just kind of shallow, because at their core, the two ideologies, even after their adjustments, are still very polarized. The fundamental conviction of Abdiel is that there should be one absolute truth in authority. This is something that Koshimizu and Yuzuru will never agree to, but the arbitrary code of her alignment dictates that Yahweh specifically has to be that truth and authority, and she ultimately has to shed this idea in order to succeed. The fundamental conviction of the Chaos faction is that there shouldn't be a central authority, and this is something that Abdiel and Ichiro will never agree to. However, the arbitrary code of the traditional Chaos faction in this game is that we rebel against God's authority with anarchy, and Koshimizu and Yuzuru have to completely abandon this idea in order to succeed. And I realize I said 2 ideologies there by mistake. I had in mind that they were the more obviously opposed ideologies, but neither of them are going to roll with neutral either, no matter how much neutral tweaks around the edges, because their core idea is about ridding the world of the influence of gods and demons. However, Yakumo's arbitrary code dictates that you can't use the godlike power either. If one man can't have all that power, why should you? Ultimately, you need to sacrifice this code in order to bring about the best outcome. I think people are wrong when they say that this game has nothing to say, because if nothing else, as much as it trips over itself trying to say it, this game does ask you one thing: is it worth abiding by your principles absolutely if you achieve inferior outcomes? Actually no, I think it's more aggressive than that. Figuratively, this game asks you, is it worth anything to abide by your principles absolutely if it means achieving dog shit? Abdiel before her fall gets dunked on by everyone, from Bethel leaders to this high school senior, for having a stick up her ass about the condemnation and God being alive. You embarrass her in front of all of these world leaders when she attempts to take matters into her own hands and enforce the condemnation herself. She is a pathetic, wimpy loser before she has any will to compromise. And the development is there. She goes from not accepting the existence of any other Nakobino than Yahweh to becoming one herself and accepting you as Yahweh's replacement. Ariok literally fucking dies because he thinks that becoming a Nahobino and enforcing the traditional Chaos Anarchy worldview is worth picking a fight with the entire rest of the world for. You know, I think I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that this game is trying to lead you to the answer of no, it's probably not worth it. You're gonna have to meet yourself in the middle at some point to achieve anything of substance. Maybe this is what the producers meant in that one interview where they said that they wanted this game's themes to be relevant to current issues. Now, at this point, a lot of you smart cookies might be asking yourselves, how does Lucifer play into all of this? He's gone unmentioned so far, and doesn't he throw a wrench into everything I've been saying? He won before the events of the game, and he's the poster boy for traditional past SMT chaos alignment, right? Perhaps, but not really. Due to a plot, he reaches a sort of enlightenment upon reaching Yahweh's throne, and succumbs to futility to a certain extent, which you learn all upon reaching him. Go figure. Futility. that's another theme. Okay, I think I'm pretty much done with this video, but I realized after recording all that bullshit that the Ariok Chaos faction, they kind of imply that they just want like all the demons to get their knowledge back. It's a detail I neglected to mention, but it would basically just lead to free-for-all, survival of the fittest, anarchy anyway, so yeah. Same difference, and just like the bad neutral ending, I'm gonna end all of a sudden. Bye!